In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and The Pavilion with me, your host, Stephen Wallace. After bringing joy to a nation via Shazia, the Afghanistan women's captain, we return to the turf to hear a previous guest, author Felix Francis. On today's show, Felix chats about his new horse racing thriller, No Reserve, his 17th. His new blockbuster focuses on the world of horse racing bloodstock based in Newmarket. Find out how Felix prepared for his new thriller, how he framed the outcome, and much more. No spoilers, but it's a real page-turner from a master storyteller. Felix previously appeared on the Paddock and the Pavilion in episode 93 in November 2021. On today's show, I'm delighted to welcome back the master of suspense and intrigue, Felix Francis. Welcome, Felix.
Thank you, Stephen. Lovely to be here.
Well, we last spoke when your book Iced had come out, and that was back in episode 93. And I did have the pleasure to meet you the other night at a book signing at the National Horse Racing Museum. How did that go for you?
Well, I think it went very well. I mean, we had a lot of people there. Not as many people turned up as said they were coming, but it was a very good evening. And I spoke for about half an hour on the latest book, No Reserve, and then signed a lot of books. So everyone seemed to be very happy.
Your brother Merrick was also there. He looked as young as you do.
Well, that's a surprise because he's nearly 3 years older than me. But he runs LRT, Lambourne Racehorse Transport. So he was there for the sales. He organises a lot of the transport of the horses that are sold after they've been through the ring. He arranges for them to be wind tested and does everything, and then they are sent off in his horse boxes to all over the country and to Ireland and to France. Whoever depends on whoever's bought them.
Have you got some more book signings lined up?
Yes, I'm going to Tring Bookshop tomorrow night, and then I'm at Hatchards in Piccadilly on Wednesday, and then I've got Hungerford Bookshop and Burford Bookshop and Cheltenham, Rossiter's Bookshop in Cheltenham later in the month.
You enjoy those types of events to promote the books?
I do. It's always nice to meet your readers and to hear what they have to say about the books, and they're very kind enough to say nice things and also come and buy the book, and it enables me to sign it for them. And it's always good. I mean, writing is something you do so much in isolation. It's not like a sport. It's not like playing cricket for England when you're in the middle of the field and you're surrounded by thousands of spectators and they watch every moment of the match. You know, writing is done in isolation in an office with the door shut against the dogs and visitors and in silence. And it is really lovely when the book is out that you can go out and meet people and meet your readers and hear back their comments. Yeah, I enjoy it very much.
I presume Father did the same, did book signings?
He did. He did book signings both in this country and in America. He always had a bigger crowd than I do, but it was he used to love doing it. He decided that when it came to signing books, he would simply say, "What is the shortest thing I can write in a book?" Because his hand used to get so tired. So he would write, "Hi, Steve, Dick Francis." Just "hi" would be the shortest thing. That was all well and good until he went to Japan on a book signing, And someone pointed out that high simply meant yes. So he had to change it slightly. But everyone came up to him and said, would you write this? And they'd produce all these things like, wishing you a very happy 90th birthday or whatever. And he'd simply write, hi, Dick Francis, because he'd have hundreds of people. We used to go to a bookshop in Maryland, and I remember the publishers ringing me up and saying, we're not quite sure of the order. Is the order for 8 books or 80 books? Because they seem to have ordered 800. And I said, 800 is correct. And he signed them all in one day.
They must have been some fantastic times traveling with him when he was signing these books.
Oh, yes. Some lovely times all over the States. And I remember going to a bookstore in Denver, Colorado called The Tattered Cover, which is, I think, one of the greatest bookshops in the world. And my father, of course, being my father, was always early. He was never late. He was always early. And we arrived 20 minutes before the book signing time. And we drove past the store, and I stared in through the window and I couldn't see anybody. So I said to my father, right, we're not going in now. Oh, come on, he said, let's get it over with. I said, no, we're not going to arrive early. So we went to a bar across the road and ordered drinks. Well, we had a drink and took a long time to pay. So by the time we actually went back to the bookstore, we were now 5 minutes late. And I stared through the window and I still couldn't see anybody. And I thought, oh, well, some you win, some you lose. And the manager of the bookstore was on the sidewalk waiting for us. And when they opened the door, they said, oh, thank God you've arrived. You're signing on the 4th floor and we can't move for people. So the bookstore was due to close. This was 7 o'clock in the evening and the bookstore was due to close at 9. Well, it didn't close until 11:15 because he was still signing books. It was a wonderful evening.
And you've also been on local radio to us, and you were on the Premier Racing podcast with Nick Luck. I heard you there.
Yes, I've done that with Nick. Nick I've known for many years. Nick was a great help with the book I wrote called Bloodline, which was about a commentator who worked then for Channel 4 Racing, as Nick used to do, and Channel 4 Racing was the chosen broadcaster at the time. And Nick, of course, was godson to Josh Gifford, champion jockey. So racing is very much in his, not only is his work, but it's very much in his blood.
And you also did a Discover Newmarket tour. Shout out there to Tracy Harding, when you took some visitors around the sales ring at Book 1 at Tattersall's. Yes,
we did the Discover Newmarket tour. We went to various places in Newmarket which exist in no reserve, and ended up at the sales ring. And Tracy organised it. She's wonderful. What she didn't tell me was that her mother was one of the people on the tour, but it all seemed to go well. So that was. And she emailed me yesterday saying that her mother hasn't stopped talking about it since we finished. So I must have done something right.
So was her mother well behaved? She asked lots of questions.
Yes, and they sat quietly in the sales ring. I told them that they could enjoy themselves. They didn't have to be too quiet, but they shouldn't wave at their friends because they might end up buying something.
Well, let's move on to No Reserve. What number is that for you for a Dick Francis novel?
Well, it's actually my number 17. The first one I wrote came out as a Dick Francis novel, and the next 4 had our joint names on, but I wrote them, he read them. In fact, he didn't even read the 4th one because Dad died in 2010, and he was so unwell for the last few months of his life that he never actually read what I'd written, and the book was only half written when he died. So No Reserve is number 17, and I've already started number 18.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that about number 18. So how many did Father do? You're a long way behind him yet.
Oh, God, I've got to go on for... I'll be 90-something if I catch him up. There were 39, but he started younger than I did. My first book was published when I was 53. his was published when he was 42. So, 41, I think, actually. So beginning of 1962. So he had a few years on me.
Yeah, we'll have to set up a handicap system to work out when you actually are ahead of him, sort of thing.
Well, perhaps it'll be a DLS.
Well, no reserve. The higher the stakes, the higher the risk. No spoilers from me because I've already read the book. It's a real page turner, and it's wonderful to see you return to the home of racing, Newmarket.
Yes, well, it's the third one I've done based in and around Newmarket, and Dad did a couple. So, I mean, Newmarket is the headquarters, as it's colloquially known. I mean, thoroughbred racing, as we know it, started in Newmarket as a result of of King Charles II moving there to avoid the plague, and indeed then the Great Fire of London. So racing in Newmarket has been going on since the 17th century. And in fact, his father before him, Charles I, who lost his head, had a palace in Newmarket and used to gallop his horses around. So Newmarket is very much involved in it's in the blood of horse racing. Not that all my books have been set there. I've set quite a few in Lambourne, in and around Lambourne, which of course is the centre for more for steeplechasing than it is for flat racing, and Iced, which was 2 books ago, was set up in the north, and Hands Down was set in Midland. So there have been. I try and spread it around. And in No Reserve, there's also part of it is set in Ireland, all good racing country.
And Tattersalls, has that featured in a Dick Francis novel before?
Well, it has briefly in my book Crisis, but not during the sales. But bloodstock sales have featured before. My father wrote a book called Knockdown back in the 70s, but it was not based in Newmarket, and it was from the point of view of a bloodstock agent, and it starts at Ascot sales. But Tattersalls has, even though in the book the sales company is not referred to as Tattersalls, I had lots of help from everyone at Tattersalls, from auctioneers, from everyone at Park Paddocks, and they were a great help to me, and I hope that they won't be too upset by what goes on in the book.
Now, Europe's leading bloodstock auctioneers, Tattersalls, how did you go about the research? Was it interviews, your visits?
I started off by visiting and going and watching the sales. In fact, I think the auctioneers got quite fed up with me sitting in the same seat for the day after day, and recording on my iPhone videos of them selling. Unfortunately, I couldn't really put the patter into the book, because otherwise it would take pages and pages of words. But I think I've got it about right, and I wanted to set the book in around the bloodstock sales. I mean, racing and gambling are intertwined. They always have been and always will be. But the biggest gambles in racing don't occur with the bookmakers or in the betting shops. The biggest gambles occur in the sales rings, where people pay a fortune for horses and in the hope that they'll turn out to be champions and sires of future champions. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There was an American colt called Justify, which was sold for $500,000 in the Keeneland sales ring in 2016. Well, it went on to win the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont Stakes. And even though its winnings on the track were an impressive $3.8 million, it's expected to earn $150 million in stud fees over its stud career, making it worth 6 times its own weight in pure gold. So that was a winner. But Snaffy Dancer, who your listeners heard about, infamously was sold for $10.3 million back in 1983 and never made it to the racetrack, and was also found to have fertility problems. So the biggest gambles occur in the sales rings, and it was something I wanted to bring to life in No Reserve.
Can you give us no spoilers, because I've read the book and I know the outcome, a little bit of a synopsis for listeners who hopefully will buy the book?
Well, I hope they will too. It starts off with my main character, Theo Jennings, who is a young auctioneer at, well, we won't call it Tattersall's, but the Newmarket Sales Company. And it starts off with him selling a colt for 3 million guineas. All horses in Newmarket have traditionally been sold in guineas, and a guinea is £1 and a shilling, or £1.05 now. And he's so excited having sold this horse for that money. It's his biggest sale, that he's first million guinea plus sale he's had. But he overhears a conversation which tends to imply that the bidding was artificially inflated by collusive bidding between two people. And then the following morning, the horse is found dead in its stable, seemingly of natural causes. But Theo is not so sure, so he sets out to investigate, and someone seems determined to stop him and will go to any lengths to do so, including murder.
And I can vouch that it's a real page turner. It's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. You go to bed, say, I'm going to read a couple of chapters, and then you've read 6 and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and that sort of thing. How do you create this page turning writing style?
Well, I suppose I learned it at my father's knee, you might say. I mean, I was just 8 years old when the first Dick Francis novel hit the bookstore stands, and I grew up with them. And I wrote bits of Dick Francis novels way back from being a 17-year-old A-level physics student designing a bomb to blow up an aeroplane in Rat Race, and writing the computer program in Twice Shy, which is not something I'm terribly proud of now because it's so out of date. But it is, I feel that I have learned how to make it a page turner. There's nothing better than for someone coming up and saying, Felix, I've got a bone to pick with you. I was up until 5 o'clock in the morning to finish your book because I needed to know what happened. And part of me is absolutely delighted. And then part of me thinks, my God, it took me a whole year to write that, and they've read it in one day. But of course, that is what every author wants. Unfortunately, I can't write them as quickly as people can read them. And so people will have to wait until next year for the next one.
When do you write? Mornings, afternoons, evenings?
I'm not terribly good in the early morning, but I try and get to my desk about 9:30. And then I write through really until about 7 o'clock will be the latest. My wife will bring me through coffee during the day and lunch. I'll often stop for lunch, but if things are going well, keep at it. And then I'll have a glass of wine about 7 o'clock, and that will be it. But actually, your mind never stops. Sometimes I think about the book all the time. I go to sleep thinking about it. I wake up in the night thinking about it. And my dear wife, Debbie, says that she loses me for 6 months. And I'm now living with the characters as opposed to living with her. But so far, so good, touch wood. They've all turned out to at least have a finish by the end of March, when the book is due at the publishers.
And do you know the ending at the start, or does the story develop as you write?
I absolutely do not know the ending at the start. I mean, I was my father and mother and me. We were all great friends of Phyllis James, P.D. James, and she used to plan the whole book out. She used to have a great sheet of paper on her sitting room floor, which she would stick together wallpaper lining paper, and she would have arrows back and forth between the characters to show the connection. She would plan the whole book out before she started writing. And I'm not like that. I have a good idea for a beginning, and I start writing the beginning. And the characters tend to take over. So anyone who says, oh, I knew who'd done it from day one, they were just a lucky guess, because I don't know. And often I try and make it so that there's 3 or 4, even 5 people who could be the villain. Not that all the books are whodunits. My father wrote a book called Bone Crack back in 1971, which is my favorite book of his. And partly it is my favorite because it's not a whodunit. You know who done it in the very first chapter. It's not so much who did it, it's how the hell do I get out of this mess? And as an homage to that, I wrote a book called Refusal. It's a Sid Halley book. And in that one, you know who the villain is right from the start. And it's how Sid goes about defeating the villain rather than the reader learns how he goes about defeating the villain rather than who the villain is. But most of them, I suppose, are whodunits to an extent, and No Reserve is certainly whodunit. And perhaps you think you know who done it right at the beginning, and you may be right, but you don't know who he done it with.
I can tell listening to you how much you do enjoy writing, though.
I do enjoy writing, but I enjoy it more when it's finished. And so here I am at the beginning of the next one. So it seems like I'm facing the north face of the Eiger and thinking, how the hell am I going to get to the top of this in the next 5 months? So it is, I suppose I've done it 17 times, and I tell myself, well, you must be able to do it one more time. But every year the expectation is greater. Some people have been kind enough to say that they think No Reserve is the best book I've ever written, and which means that they're looking forward to the next one because they want the next one to be even better. And it is a struggle to always. I mean, it's a struggle to come up with the plot. My father wrote 39. I've written 17. So that's that's 56 storylines you can't use again. So and every time I think of a storyline, every time I find a loophole in the racing authority rules, the next thing that happens is they close it off. As soon as the book comes out and someone from the BHA reads it, the loophole is closed off. So it becomes increasingly more difficult. Back in the 60s, my father wrote a book called Bloodstock, which was about kidnapping a stallion, or not kidnapping, but horse-napping a stallion, and using the stallion to improve breeding stock. Well, it was all a good story at the time, but you couldn't do it today because every thoroughbred foal born in the worldwide is DNA tested to ensure that it is the son or daughter of the horses they claim it is. And so Bloodsport, great story as it is, just wouldn't work in today's climate. Just technology has moved on. Not to say that it's not a good story to read if you want to. A lot of my writing colleagues write what are called golden age mysteries. Golden age mysteries are mysteries from back in the 1940s, 50s and 60s. And I just think it's a cop-out to not have DNA or mobile phones, whereas I write my books in the present day.
Yeah, I've got visions here of the BHA or officials of the BHA getting your book each time just to try and sort of quell any future problems that they might have.
Well, I had a character who was a BHA investigator. And at the time, Steve Harmon was chairman of the BHA, and he read the book, and he got in touch with me and say, "It's not like that." I said, "Steve, doesn't matter. It makes for a good story. Never let reality get in the way of a good story." I can't remember who said that, but it's absolutely right.
But you've just signed a new book deal, so you've got to keep going at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, I've signed. The deal is for the next one, and the next one, well, the working title is joint enterprise, which is a legal term for some. You can get convicted of murder through joint enterprise, even if you didn't pull the trigger or do the stabbing. But it's going to be about owning of racehorses in syndicates, which seems to be increasingly popular because of the expense of owning a horse outright. That people now increasingly own horses in syndicates. But what about if it's someone, a member of the syndicate, or someone else wants to control the syndicate and determine where the horse runs, and to that matter, how it runs? So we'll wait and see.
Do you have other ideas for future ones as well?
Oh, you're joking. It's bad enough trying to think up one storyline, let alone another one. The one after that, I will start thinking about when this one is finished in March. If only. I mean, people say to me, "How many storylines did your father actually leave you?" Well, the answer is he didn't leave any at all. And all the ones that I wrote with him, and indeed the first one I wrote, which came out as a Dick Francis, he didn't have any storylines in there at all. So, but I mean, my books are not about the horses, they're about the people. Racing and thoroughbreds are simply the canvas against which I paint the human story. The publishers say, well, if you wrote a book about something which wasn't to do with racing, we'd publish it, but we'd rather you didn't, because that is the, as it were, the mark of a Dick Francis novel. And a Dick Francis novel is still printed on the front of mine. It's no longer an individual. It's now more of a trademark of the type of book it is.
Talking of racing, do you still get to go racing yourself?
I do. I go to races. I go racing fairly frequently. I mean, I went to Newbury in September. I went to the Ebor meeting in York in August. I went to Royal Ascot. I go to Cheltenham quite frequently. I wouldn't say I go racing every week, but I probably go every month.
And when we last spoke, there was a new statue of your father that was going to be unveiled at Aintree. I'm sure you were there when that was unveiled.
I was. It was the most awful day. It blew a gale. In fact, the night before the unveiling, the statue, which was not the anchoring glue and cement hadn't properly set, and the statue blew over the night before it was due to be unveiled, crashing through the plate glass window of the weighing room. As I said to the chairman of Aintree, Dick Francis has another fall at Aintree. But they managed to get the statue back up and re-cemented it in place. And it was unveiled by the Princess Royal in an absolute torrential rainstorm. But she was very gracious. I very fortunately was able to sit next to her at lunch. And it's a great joy to me to have the statue at Aintree. It wasn't my initiation. It was initiated by a man called Peter Johnson from the British Sporting Arts Trust. And but it is a great joy to me to know that my father stands outside the weighing room at his beloved Aintree. He loved that racecourse in spite of it being the scene of his greatest disaster on Devon Lock in the 1956 Grand National. But I look forward to going back there shortly to tell him all about No Reserve.
The 1956 Grand National, the race that finished that you must have seen more than anyone else in the whole world.
Oh, I've watched that. It wasn't televised. It was the Pathé News film. And there were 250,000 people at Aintree that day. I mean, a crowd like you'd never get today. And they were all cheering for the Queen Mother's horse. And my father thinks that it was the cheering of the crowd that the horse pricks his ears just as he's coming towards the winning post. And my father thinks at that point this wall of noise hit him. I watched the film 1,000 times at least. I just wish he'd win it once.
Well, thank you very much, Felix, for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion. I've got to hand my book over to my mother shortly because she wants to read it, and I can recommend it to any of our listeners. Haven't given any secrets away on this podcast. Well,
I hope your mother enjoys it. When I signed the book for you, Steve, I expected your mother to buy her own copy. But no, I'm sure that the more people that read it, doesn't matter how they get hold of it, it'll be a joy for me. I hope that people listening to this podcast will give it a go. If you've read Dick Francis books in the past and you feel that you haven't read any of mine, then give them a go, because I'm sure you won't be disappointed.
Well, thank you again. I can vouch you didn't say hi, Stephen, Felix Francis in the book.
Well, Stephen, it's been lovely to talk to you again, and hope we will talk again soon.
Thank you very much.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.